We're having this session reflecting our communities through music, and it's the through music piece that we really want to talk about. As orchestras have been in what I think is kind of over at least 10 years, we've been in a big pivot, and it's a pivot from shifting inward to shifting outward toward our communities. And the first ways many orchestras have done this is through their education and community engagement departments. And that has been, you know, a tremendous benefit and forward movement in our field and kind of the front line of our move toward greater connection to our communities. I've often wondered, though, about the language around that. If community engagement in education is what we call what happens outside of the concert hall, then what in the world are we doing inside the concert hall? Is that not also community engagement? Is that not also education? How do those principles and those imperatives show up in our core concert work? And frankly, if those imperatives aren't reflected in our core concert work, then we're kind of running two businesses, and we're kind of sending some mixed messages that when you walk into your subscription series, we're the same as we've always been, and we address our community through our community engagement departments, and that's not really a helpful message and doesn't really speak to the authenticity of what our art form has done and what can continue to do in terms of educating and also connecting people in our communities. So we wanted to devote this time to really looking into the music itself and what happens on our main stages. And we have a wonderful panel to help us do that. They are very musical people, and starting to my left is Isaac Thompson, the VP for Artistic Planning at the New York Philharmonic, Mei-Ann Chen, Music Director of the Chicago Sinfoneitta, and Frank Candelaria, Associate Provost of the University of Texas at El Paso. Is that still, you're still doing that? But you have another job, too.
Well, yeah, I'm making a move. Actually, in a couple of weeks, I'm the incoming Dean for the School of the Arts at Purchase.
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Great. We look forward to welcoming you to the East Coast.
Thank you.
To start, I wanted to show you a slide. These are questions that really struck me, and they come from the Cincinnati Symphony. And the Cincinnati Symphony, some years ago, launched an initiative called One City, One Symphony. Isaac was actually quite instrumental in its launch. And it was at a league presentation, in fact, where these questions first surfaced. And when I saw them, I was so surprised to see them, because these are not the kinds of questions people in symphony orchestras, particularly music directors and artistic programmers, sit down and think about as they go about the work of planning their seasons and making choices about what they're going to do. And so these are questions that Cincinnati used to focus a lot of its work, and in particular, a whole annual series of programs that they would do, and the answers to these questions would lead to their concert programming. So I don't want to go into Cincinnati particularly, but just wanted to throw these questions up on the screen to get us in the frame of mind that these are some of the questions that are asked inside of orchestras as they commence doing this work. And I think to get us into this, maybe start at the beginning, and I throw this open to any one of our panelists, and to ask, why should an orchestra care about this? I mean, why does this even matter? I mean, we know we've been chugging along here, doing things the way we do them. A lot of people come to hear our concerts. Why does it matter that we do this work on our main series concert stages?
Well, I guess I'll break the ice here. I think it all comes down to the existential question. And one of the things I've been struggling a lot with over a number of years is this whole question of art for art's sake, which I think is the biggest blight that's been put on to the arts, because as we all know, we get into arts for a lot of different reasons, and it's never just for its own sake. Reflecting on the earliest days of practicing, why did I practice? Why did I get into the arts? Why did I do the art? Well, because girls paid attention to me when I was doing it, and this was when I was in high school. That was my motivation. Now, and that's a quick way and an easy way to start, but I think really what we do this for, we want to be impactful in our communities. When I moved over from the University of Texas at Austin, where I'd been for 12 years, and I think I knew Isaac back then, over to UT El Paso, one of the things that attracted me about that challenge is the opportunity to put art at the center of a community that was not just under-resourced, but severely under-resourced. So that was the challenge, and part of the work that I've done there is building a unique partnership between a research university, University of Texas at El Paso, and a community's symphony orchestra, the El Paso Symphony Orchestra. That just sets up the framework for my comments today on why it matters and how it matters. I think it's a shifting question. And the thing is that the arts organizations don't have to do it alone. There are some wonderful university partners out there to help do that. And I've enjoyed that work very much in El Paso over the past 5 years, and it's exactly what I look forward to cultivating in New York in the coming years. So, and that'll frame my comments for the rest of the one, but I'd love to hear.
I think it's interesting, you know, your comment about shifting kind of priorities and such. I think it's a shifting landscape, too, of American orchestras over the last 15 or 20 years. I don't think it's fair to say that orchestras have been completely oblivious to their community, but I think the question over the last several years is how can your orchestra or how can our orchestras really reflect the communities in which we live in? And I think that it's an evolving conversation, and there's certainly still work to be done. But the more you dive into that question and the more you really explore that, I think it just leads to deeper and deeper connections, both musically, but also with your audience, which is tremendously important. And it's incredible the engagement that you can have on every level of the institution, with the musicians, with the board, with community partners, and it just opens up the door, and it's a fantastic point of entry into the great arts that we love. So it's a very interesting time, I think, to have these conversations, and I think it's a very important question to be asked as we think about the future of American orchestras.
And I would just add to that, for those of you who experienced the giant in our city from last night's tremendous performance of the CSO, well, my orchestra performed in the same space. And so we have the very particular challenge of, well, there's the audience for CSO, and here Maestro Paul Freeman created this orchestra made out of probably the most makeup of members in the country. But then he had to go and get an audience for it. And we perform on Monday night. Keep that in mind. You know, how do people want to come to classical concert on Monday night and go to work the next morning? And so we had to literally find a niche. And literally all of our programming is cultivating new audiences that are topical and with timely concerts. And so if we don't do that, we simply don't have an orchestra that will have enough support. And so now we have 5 pairs of subscriptions at the home of the CSO, and we have the biggest increase, this is interesting for you to know, for the age group 29 to 45 in the past 5 years, for example. So it's tapping into that young audience that everybody say they don't come to classical concert, they come to Chicago Sinfoneitta.
And I think it's interesting, bouncing off what Mei-Ann said, when you think of millennials, and I will admit that I am a millennial, you know, we're constantly on our phones and striving for information and looking for connection, and I think orchestras can do a wonderful job of actually making broader connections with the arts. There are so many interesting storylines and things to dive into the music beyond just a kind of musicological discussion. And I think that was the goal really of One City, One Symphony, was to really dive into some of those connections and see what kind of impact that could have on the community. And it really did. People are hungry to make those connections.
You know, 2 of the concepts that have come back repeatedly in the last couple of days from our various speakers, one has been about listening, don't do, but listen, and also showing up. And, you know, thinking about orchestra programming, I remember a conversation with Simon Woods from years ago when he was artistic administrator at the Philadelphia Orchestra. And I asked him, I said, how do you make programs here? And he said, well, Maestro Eschenbach and I, we go off for a couple of days, we make the programs, and when we're done, we hand them to the marketing department. And I said, well, do you ever think about the community when you program? And he said, well, why would we do that? And I said, well, you know, maybe there are choruses in town or, you know, other artists, you know, you might want to think about collaborating. We said, no, you know, we just put our heads down and we make the programs. Now, Simon has gone a long way in his thinking about programming since then, and our field has. But, you know, our tradition is that, you know, we are going against the grain. We curate. We tell our audiences what they're going to get. We tell them when they have to show up if they want to get it. And so how do we reconcile, you know, this practice we have? We're the experts. We know what the music is that ought to be played, with this idea that now all of a sudden we want to be part of our communities. We want to listen to our communities. We want to program in ways that are meaningful to our communities and address concerns in our communities. How do we kind of put those two opposing ideas together?
Well, I think at its core, one of the problems with American orchestras is we are too often reactive as opposed to being proactive, and we're also risk averse inherently. This is a kind of an aside, but there was a joke amongst artistic administrators at one point, and this stemmed from a colleague who was formerly at the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, that the joke was he was going to call all of his programs The Glories of the Italian Baroque, and then do whatever he wanted to, you know, as a kind of marketing tagline. So, you know, it's interesting because as a programmer, there are a lot of competing interests that you're dealing with. You have the, you know, wishes of the musicians, of the conductor, of the audience, certainly. But I think as we look to the future, we live in a very complex world and an ever-changing world from every single level, technologically, from a political standpoint, certainly. It's a very interesting time. And I think it really raises the question of how can orchestras contribute to the overall dialogue? You mentioned University of Texas, and there was an interesting idea that was floated a few years ago by the former dean, Bob Freeman, and it got me actually thinking about this on a more global level for American orchestras. But his idea for the University of Texas was during kind of a J term or a time of pause during the academic calendar, how interesting would it be if one university chose one topic and every department in the university decided to address that topic from their own vantage point. So, you know, scientists would take, say, like water conservation. You know, scientists would address that, and the opera program would stage an opera, you know, on that theme, or write music on that. And every single department of the university would be unsiloed in a sense. And at the end of that, you would have this kind of mass document that would, you know, be this university's response to that. And it's really interesting to kind of consider all of the issues that all of our communities face, and how devoid in many ways orchestras are in terms of addressing those things. And I think that's a real opportunity for us not only to engage with our community, but engage with a multitude of community partners. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's a very, very interesting time, just ripe for opportunity for making these connections.
One of the things that we've tried and has been very successful is exactly that, interdisciplinary but thematic programming that's relevant to the community. So I'm going to go show you very quickly on one of the kind of galvanizing types. One of the things that we've done in El Paso is that there is a program called Music Unwound that is curated by Joseph Horowitz, who you may know, and which is funded by the NEH, National Endowment for the Humanities. Now, what's interesting about that is the NEH does not typically fund orchestras, is that right? However, if there is an infusion of humanities content that's relative to the community, they will. And so one of the things that we did is we did programming on using Silvestre Revueltas' film Redes. This was also done very successfully recently with the South Dakota Symphony Orchestra, David Geyer here, and Jennifer, she's over there. Now, what made it so impactful in El Paso, and this goes to your point, Isaac, is that I'm showing you here a slide of Mr. Trump's wall. Actually, it already existed. This is the dividing line between Mexico and the United States. Silvestre Revueltas' film Redes is a celebration of Mexican art during a time when anti-Mexico sentiment was very high, and this was very impactful on the border. And so we had a lot of programming, exactly as Isaac has suggested, with our English department, our history department, sociology department, but didn't limit it to the university. We also worked out with the public schools in the area, particularly our under-resourced public schools. Here we have the symphony concert with the El Paso Symphony. What's remarkable about this picture right here, this is a school in what is called a colonia's serving area. A colonia is an unincorporated part of El Paso County. About 500,000 people in Texas live in these parts of the world, where per capita income is about $5,000 per year. No running water, no electricity, no basic services. But look at all the students that have come to attend just a humanities presentation on what goes behind redes. But this is what I found to be actually, we also had a concert in Juarez on that theme, but look at this. This what turned out to be the most striking picture. What you're looking at here is students from the university who also happen to be members of the symphony orchestra playing what we did not expect is that children from the Mexican side of the wall were going to run up to the wall. And what's amazing about this is that this is music. Music cannot be held back by a wall. You can see their smiling faces. This little boy wants to reach through. I think what we have here is exactly what Isaac is talking about, exactly what Mei-Ann's been doing with her orchestra, is an example of thematic programming that's relevant to the community and is driving important issues of the day. If this is not a testament to the power of music permeating as it is this wall that is meant to separate one set of human beings from another, I don't know what is. And this is music that's doing it. So I think exactly what Isaac is saying, what Bob Freeman has been advocating is exactly what's inspired me and fired me up to do the kind of stuff that we're doing in El Paso and the kind of stuff that can actually be done anywhere. So that's my little jumping on point.
If I could just ask you a couple of questions about that. Yeah. In mounting this work inside the El Paso Symphony, did everyone just kind of get on board right away? Did there have to be any advocacy for it? Did you have to give anything up? Did you have to raise a lot of money? Or how does this go?
Well, one of the best things about it is particularly when you're partnering with a university, a lot of that work is done for you. I listen to a lot of folks talking about, well, what about marketing? What about analytics? That's what universities do. Analytics, they're in the business of analytics. So if you're looking for research on how this will resonate with your community, go to your local research university. One of the things that is often, I think, a mistake is that a lot of times when there is an attempt to partner with a university, you go to the music department, right? But this is a classic example of two spent swimmers choking their art, right? We're both in the same boat because a lot of music departments within comprehensive university environments are very siloed, exactly what you pointed out. The thing is, you want to make friends with folks who are in administration, whose business it is to crunch the numbers, who have existing partnerships with your local school districts, who understand what their priorities are, and also what the existing infrastructure is. A lot of times this is scary to do because you think you have to start from the ground up. The infrastructure is there, and the university has those partnerships and is very eager in many cases to help you get access to that. So the run-up cost for us was nothing because the infrastructure was there. The musicians bought into it because it goes back to this first, is it art for art's sake? No, it's art because we feel that it's important, that it has potential to impact, to transform communities, nations, and thinking. This is music in the work of cultural diplomacy. It can't be stopped by a wall, right? So if you need the infrastructure, you don't have to start from the ground up. Partner with your local university, and they've got that kind of stuff for you. And they're normally very closely partnered with those school districts to give you the kind of feeders you need to have the impact and reach that you want to have with your community.
It's interesting, you mentioned the idea of being siloed in universities, but I think also orchestras are oftentimes siloed. Marketing departments and artistic departments, and Jesse alluded to this, how, programming has been done in many orchestras in the past where, a programmer and the music director kind of go off somewhere and come back and, present a season. And I think for this kind of discussion and these kinds of discussions, it's absolutely imperative that you have institutional buy-in from every level. And what I've found at the New York Philharmonic, and we're starting to move more and more into this space, and the way we define this is really finding the intersection between the artistic and the social imperative, and I think there's a natural point of connection there that is ripe to be explored. But the more we get the entire staff on board, the development staff, the marketing staff, all kind of chugging in the same direction and aligned, and we have institutional conversations. It takes time, it takes work, there are a lot of meetings, and then that translates to the board, getting the board involved in that and getting them excited. It's amazing because the musicians really want success as well. They want the institutions to be successful. And when you're all swimming in the same direction, it just seems like there are limitless possibilities. But it all stems from de-siloing our administrative staffs, I think.
So I know it's a little bit out of the order we discussed, but do you want to tell us a little bit about what the Philharmonic's doing about the intersection of the art and social issues?
Sure. Well, it's a very interesting time at the New York Philharmonic, as I'm sure many of you are aware. We have a lot of changes in leadership within the last year. We have a new CEO and Deborah Borda. We have a new music director coming in. I started about a year ago, and it just felt, the way I would describe it, as a major inflection point in the history of a very storied institution. I think we are the oldest symphony orchestra in the United States. And it's a tremendous history. But one of the things that Deborah and I were struck by when we started was just the New York Philharmonic's history of innovation. And how innovation has really been a catalyst for the institution moving forward, and that is our natural place. That's what we have to really rely on, is innovation. One of the other challenges that we just have, which is inherent, is we just have a very large season. We do a lot of concerts. We have 104 subscription concerts over the course of the year. Depending on touring, it can be 33 to 36 weeks. So it's just a lot of content week after week in a city with a lot of competition in various orchestras that are coming to Carnegie Hall, and the Metropolitan Opera is right across the plaza. And so there are a lot of challenges. So we really wanted to think on multiple levels, but also think about the New York Philharmonic's place as New York's orchestra, because that's what it was founded to be. We are New York's orchestra. So the way that we began to think about this was to organize our season around what we called pillars, big pillar projects that we could kind of build off of. We haven't given up on subscription concerts and doing all of the remarkable performances that we do, but we wanted to choose a certain few moments in the season to really put a lot of institutional focus behind. So there is a video, maybe this is a good time to play this video. And it describes some of the pillars that we're doing, and this is where we're really diving into that question: where is the intersection between the social and the artistic imperative?
The New York Philharmonic welcomes Jaap van Zweden as its new music director in the 2018-19 season, and with him an ambitious schedule of adventurous music making, connections with New York City, and explorations of music and the social conscience. New York City thrives on the energy of generations of immigrants who have called it home. Jaap van Zweden and the Philharmonic will pay tribute to them with New York Stories, Threads of Our City. The centerpiece will be the world premiere of Julia Wolf's Fire in My Mouth, based on the 1911 Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire.
This new piece for the Philharmonic is the third piece in a series of pieces about the American worker. I had been thinking about women in the workforce, and we're talking about immigrant women from Russia, Eastern Europe, and Southern Italy, and they came with a skill set. They know how to sew, and they wind up working on these huge factory floors. The title was actually said by Clara Lemlich, who was one of the amazing Politico leaders of the time. There was an interview with her later, I think sometime around 1950s to 1960s, and she said, then I had fire in my mouth. It's a multimedia piece. My collaborator is Jeff Sugg. He's creating a projection design. We're working with photographs and other kinds of archival material. Such a gift, really, to be able to lay that on these super high-level musicians with Jaap conducting. It's really thrilling.
Since its memorial for Abraham Lincoln in 1865, the Philharmonic has engaged the crises and questions of its time. With music of conscience, Jaap van Zweden and the Philharmonic will explore the intersection of music and social issues.
My symphony came about because I was overcome by the number of friends I'd lost who died of AIDS. And so I have the conscience of a need to do that, just as when I saw the quilt, I felt the immediacy of the quilt when you look down and see beautiful tapestries, and then you stretch your eyes as far as the horizon can see and you see more quilts. And I thought music could do this. Music can be intimate with a turn of a solo violin or something, and then it could be a huge symphony orchestra demonstrating the tragedy, and I felt I had to do that. Maestro knows how to handle the big forces, and this is a very large orchestra, super large orchestra, and requires a Mahlerian kind of performance. But Jaap is a man who can do that and will do that, and I'm so thrilled he's conducting this piece.
One of the things that happened to me when I was young is I saw a production of Fidelio. On the one hand, I thought it was amazing that here was this opera that was based on a political impulse, and yet it was an opera that tried to downplay the political implications of it. I thought ever since then how great it would be to try to figure out how to make that political story go farther. There's no Beethoven music in my piece, and there's no Beethoven libretto. I take things which I think are odd or not pushed farther, I rewrite them. It's a version which is made for a symphony orchestra to be an integral part of the performance. So one of the things I'm very excited about is the New York Philharmonic and their incredible power, virtuosity, and clarity. I'm very excited that Jaap has such great connection to the original music and to music being written right now.
Ever since it gave the U.S. premiere of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony in 1843, the Philharmonic has championed the music of its time. Building on the Philharmonic's commitment to nurturing long-term relationships with today's composers, Jaap van Zweden will immerse orchestra and audience in the music of his Dutch compatriot, Louis Andriessen.
For a long time already, and certainly since I had read the Odyssey of Homer, they say here, I had a kind of fear but also interest in Agamemnon. I had the idea of I should make a piece on him. And then I thought of a symphonic poem.
Experience a season of timely themes that kindle personal reflection and collective action with the Philharmonic's new maestro, Jaap van Zweden.
This was our effort to kind of organize the season around these big pillars. So the pillars are the New York Stories, Threads of Our City, which is a real deep dive into immigration in New York through the lens of this new work by Julia Wolf, Fire in Her Mouth. And then Music of Conscience, a 3-week exploration of music that has been written in response to societal or political crises over time. And then one thing that doesn't show up on the video, but it's another pillar, is a thing that we're calling Fill the Hall, P-H-I-L, the Hall, which is our effort to invite people who have never been to the Philharmonic, who serve New Yorkers. And there's just, it's incredible to look at the data. And we do have impact, certainly, on New York City, but we can do so much more. And this is our effort to really invite in as many people from our community that have never experienced the New York Philharmonic through our doors. And we're going to do a whole series of 1-hour concerts, inviting them in for a very low ticket price of $5 so that they can experience the orchestra. So it's been really exciting to have these conversations institutionally and get the board and the staff and everyone very, very excited. The musicians are fully engaged. And it's created, I think, a kind of energy and a kind of, I don't know, mission-driven energy to all of the conversations that we have at the Philharmonic. So it's very exciting, and it's something that I think we're going to definitely continue.
So, you know, one obvious question is prompts, and I don't want us to get to it now, because I want to turn this over to Mei-Ann in a second. But let's just be thinking about, you know, when you look at a season like that, and you want to know, well, so how are you going to know if this works? You know, what are the measures? What are the metrics? Is this about ticket sales? Is it about partnerships? How loud they applause? The critical review? So we'll get back to that. But Mei-Ann, I know you have some of your own.
Yeah, well, I think you actually talk about the point. I want to focus on, because when you have budget of the New York Philharmonic, it's almost like you guys can do anything on the planet, from the small orchestra perspective. So those of you who are smaller orchestras out there, I just want to encourage you to think. For example, Chicago Sinfoneitta is what I call a mighty boutique orchestra model in the country, meaning we got 5 pairs of subscription to survive. And if we have a ticket sales that flop, it's going to cost our bottom line so much more than if you have a concert that doesn't fill the hall. And so it's a question my team, and they're here because I live up here and they bring me down to the floor and said, can this sell, can this make money, and so they're happy to answer any question. So we constantly have to ask ourselves, we take risk, but how can this risk be sustainable? And to give you, for those of you who don't know Chicago Sinfoneitta, we're unique in terms of we're funded to champion for minority. And obvious first thought of minority comes to African American and Latino musicians. And Maestro Paul Freeman has done that. But also, if you think about minority, and that's what we hit onto about 2 years ago, and this is before the country has this women movement happening, is there's an obvious minority happening, which is women composers. If you look around, there's a survey, I don't remember, I think Baltimore Symphony maybe, that literally did a survey. So less than 2% of the entire repertoire performed by professional orchestras in our country, less than 2% were works by women composers. That's worse than milk choices. I mean, it's just not right. And so, so we launch onto that. My team said, let's go for that theme of women composers. It's all fun to talk about. It was a happy ending, but let me tell you the scary part. We wanted to, so we turned it into a Project W for our 30th anniversary season, which is 4 commissions, 5 existing pieces by women composers. That doesn't sound like a lot to you, right? 9 in a season of 20 pieces. Well, we became number 2 orchestra in the country, only after Los Angeles Philharmonic, who had 10 pieces in their 200-some pieces in the season. And so it's blowing it out of proportion. Anybody recognize Price? Florence Beatrice Price, raise your hand. I'd just like to see. Okay, well, good for you. Do you know Dances in the King Break? Raise your hand if you do. Okay. Oh, what? Well, good for you. I'm the one championing it. I don't know where you know this piece. Okay. Jennifer Higdon, you know, dance car. But for those of you who don't know this history, I've been championing for Jennifer Higdon since my tenure 7 years ago, before the CSO finally performed her first work this February. So she's not really well known in terms of the CSO audience. So, and that's, you see all the funny signs, you see how many premieres there is. Okay, going down. Rena Esmail, raise your hand if you do. Okay, it's getting fewer hands. You saw her in the Street Symphony video the other day. So, and that's a world premiere piece, Me Too. Okay, the last one is very interesting. I wanted to have a variation of different generations. Dora Pejacevic. Am I saying right? Okay, it's hard to pronounce. Raise your hand if you know that name. Well, you don't count. You're my team, you don't count. But there is a hand in the back. She happened to be the first Croatian symphonic composer in the country, in her country of Croatia. Her symphony from 1918 has never probably been played in the States. Actually, our intern found this. So, can you feel my panic and their panic when you have a program like this? How do we sell? But we braced each other. We said, we got the audience built up. We're going to take a chance because we champion for minority. We just have to do one. That's for the art's sake. We thought, right? I was bracing myself for like, this is March, weather still is bad in Chicago, and that night was like stormy, I remember. And I was bracing myself for like, if I'm happy to have like 800 people in the Symphony Center that you attended last night. Well, to our biggest surprise, the audience came. And it was actually pretty big. And we had one of the biggest single group sale, because I want to play you this video. One of our board member came to us when we were designing this Project W and Hear Me Roar, and she said, I have the perfect collaboration with you guys. So Hear Me Roar, I'll just go through a little bit. You can see amplifying women's voices in leadership. This is their event. I'm just going to go through. This is a collage of picture that you see. It's turning, you see the picture in the very bottom. We had 150 people who have never come to Chicago Sinfoneitta concert and probably never set foot in the Symphony Center of Orchestra Hall in Chicago. There is a video.
Welcome to the Leading Women Executives Spring 2018 Alumni Event. We're going to do something a little bit different this evening. We're partnering with Chicago Sinfoneitta to produce an event entitled Hear Me Roar, Amplifying Women's Voices in Leadership.
The Sinfoneitta's March 12th concert, Hear Me Roar, is all about women, celebrating women's unique voices in classical music and placing their work center stage where it has always belonged.
So we invited the Leading Women Executives community to this event to lead from every seat, to hear their voices, to maximize their contribution, and to play their roles in the performance.
So a lesson for us, and to Isaac's point, you know, you build a theme, they have no clue. I mean, even you are in our field and you don't even know the last composer. I mean, that's how daring our programming has become. But they came because they trusted us to know, okay, it's a women program and I'm gonna show up and have a good time. And actually, it was one of the most memorable concerts. I mean, the audience loved the pieces, even the orchestra musicians who, you walk this fine line of traditional war horses and really sort of out there projects. They have to fight that battle too. They all like to play the war horses. It's easier to prepare. Everybody knows what's going on. Even our musicians finally came on board and said, wow, I really like this piece. If you don't know Dora Pejasevic's symphony, I encourage you, you can find that online. Symphony F-sharp minor, it's just an incredible piece. You can hear almost glimpse of Strauss tone poem, Wagner, even Bruckner. And the first review that was in Munich, the critic didn't know she was a woman. It was only listed by last name. And so it's a little bit, you take the chances. Of course, you can't, it's after years of building trust with the audience. And so it was a happy surprise for us.
What I'm amazed by Mei-Ann because I think when you hear her talk, you really get the sense that she firmly and deeply believes in what she's doing and what the programming is at the Chicago Sinfoneitta, and I think that's a huge takeaway for me always when I hear such a great arts leader talking about that. But that belief in your programming and the belief that you can have an impact is so important, and to have that institution-wide, to get the board and to get the entire staff and the musicians behind that and really believing in what you're doing is absolutely critical, I think, and it's just really phenomenal, absolutely.
So before taking questions from all of you, just to come back to this question I asked earlier, maybe just briefly from each one of you, looking at your own work, and Mei-Ann, you started to answer this, but how do you measure whether or not this is working? What are your indicators for telling you this is a success? Why don't you start, Isaac?
Well, of course, you know, we have to look at ticket sales and see if people are coming to the hall. But I think it's also, and this is harder to quantify, but it was interesting. We did a concert last week, actually, that was a little bit of a risk. It was a one-off concert with Esa-Pekka Salonen that was very multidisciplinary, that wasn't on our subscription series at all. It was all based on single tickets, and we decided to market this primarily using social media. And it was a risk, and it was a little scary because a week and a half out, the sales did not look that good, and we were all kind of concerned about this. But actually, the week of the performance, we had a huge uptick, and the concert sold out, and there was a real energy in the hall. And I don't know how you actually measure that, but everyone who was there from the staff picked up on that. There was this kind of atmosphere, that indescribable atmosphere, and it was joyous, and people were excited, and there was this sense of experimentation and fun and adventure. And I don't know how to quantify that in any way, but I think we all came out of that concert feeling really great, and that we did make an impact. So I would say that's kind of how we measured success, at least on that event.
Oh, sure. Well, one of the things I want to stress, because the part that I can speak to here is when you partner with a university or an academic institution, you can afford to take a longer view, because the university can absorb the shock of experiments, say, more than your bottom lines can. So that's one of the reasons that I've come to really to emphasize the importance of these types of partnerships. Now, of course, the metrics shift also when you work with a university, because you can try new programming that's relevant to your community, and the metrics become things that are relevant to the educational enterprise. For example, recruitment. Recruitment of first-time college students, retention during the critical first 45 hours. Now, these are things that orchestras don't measure. However, if you can help your local educational institutions move their needles on that, they become very strong partners for you, because they have a lot of very important resources that you can take advantage of and allow you to take the longer view in terms of cultivating future audiences. Very important, because when you have these networks that reach out into your public schools, starting in some cases grade 5 and up, and when you're working with your university students who are going to become earning doctors and lawyers and whatever, you're looking at cultivating your future donor base, your future audience, and you're doing so in a way that's strategic, that you can measure over the longer term, and in a way that really integrates you into the fabric of a community. And you can also leverage that, right? You can leverage that when people say, well, why are we programming Beethoven yet again? Well, our partner here with the university shows that this has had a huge impact on getting their students interested in the history of the period, in personal biography, in the important, in other words, what we're doing is building new audiences that can articulate very clearly the central importance of the arts in communities today. Not just something if you have enough time and if you have enough money. It becomes something that is fully integrated into the community. But again, that's something that you don't have to do all of the heavy lifting. Universities, academic institutions are there to partner with you to do that. And if you're looking for seed money to put a toe in the water, I would strongly recommend looking into the NEH, and particularly the programming that's curated by Joseph Horowitz called Music Unwound. As a matter of fact, he's looking for new partners right now. So you can take advantage of thematic interdisciplinary programming experiments that allow you to partner with the university, and the cost to you is going to be greatly diminished because you're going to use someone else's money.
To echo both my colleague Frank and Isaac's points, and also to add on to it, if I could quantify what you were describing, that atmosphere in the room, into one word: buzz. Buzz in the room, and how we have touched the audience and how we touch the community. So if I may show you one of our craziest program, and I have to get back to my little technical station here, then you will know the kind of metric that we, so here's another program. And let me tell you, my job is really difficult. For those of you who think programming is easy, you live in that space of trying to make everybody happy. There's the audience, there's the musicians, there's the staff, there's the board, and sometimes you just want to quit your job. And that moment came for me for this program when my partner in crime, who's not here, is at a different session. Jim Hurst has been in the arts for Chicago scene for decades. So he knows, the resources out there, who to partner with, much more so than me, who grew up in Taiwan and America gave me a dream to become conductor. Jesse knew me from the very beginning when I just wanted to be a youth orchestra conductor. And so here I am with the most diverse orchestra in the country, with programming that is so daring. Every one of our programs is outside the box. So for those of you who are wanted to go that route, we have been there, done that. Talk to us. We can help your fear, manage your fear. So Jim called me and said, and I was traveling, and said, man, there is this punk marching band that has a huge following in Chicago. How can we collaborate with them? 30-piece punk marching band, 30 people with mismatched uniforms. And I lost sleep for 2 nights, and I almost quit my job. I'm like, I can't make this work. I mean, we are symphony orchestras. What do you want me to do? I didn't even grow up in this country. And so, anyway, we came up with this program. I am so proud to share. I'll just give you a little bit summary. So the first half is standard concert. So we give them pieces that may have connections to band. English Folk Song Suite by Vaughan Williams, followed by Britain, Young Person's Guide, featuring every section, sort of setting up better of the band's idea. Second half, well, you have been in the Symphony Center last night, so let me describe to you. It was my dream come true. Every time I sit in a CSO audience, I'm like, what can I do with that stage? And so we start the second half with 2 pieces arranged for orchestra. But how is the band introduced? My dream come true. They signed waivers to be in the piano lift. When we started the theme and people started hearing, I do hear the band, but where are they? And the stagehand of CSO, oh, he had the field day, just operating that thing. And so you see this sousaphone sticking out. The whole audience just went, it became a rock concert from that point on. And we loved it. And so after that, the second piece has a klezmer influence. And so and in my meeting with them, they even told me, man, we have cheerleaders. Oh my gosh, I mean, what do you want me to do with them on a symphony concert? So I asked them to do a cheer of Mahler 1. It was an African-American male singing soprano voices, supported by 3 lovely ladies, and they did a cheer on Mahler 1. It was so just smart and out of this world. Then leading into, because the klezmer piece ends on the same pitch to the slow movement of Mahler 1, which has it's klezmer. And so we make that connection between the punk marching band, klezmer, and Mahler 1. And then what did we end? Tchaikovsky 1812. Of course. With Mukapata being the invading French, and the orchestra protecting its motherland. So it's been battle of the bands. And so I will show you in a minute. You have to be there to see it. So they choreograph themselves very smartly, running down the aisles, like, the audience being invaded as well. They come on the choir loft holding baguettes. They ran out of food. That's why they lost. And the end, I mean, the orchestra hall doesn't allow cannons. Need I say that? So how do we deal with cannons? We have confetti cannons, 13 shots. We tried 2, for those of you who are in the balcony, we tried 2 to aim just the right angle because it's like nosebleed section right up there. And then save the 11 shots for the performance. You will get to witness the confetti flying in front of the screen. This is a take that is captured from the balcony. it takes a teamwork to really create something magical on stage, and here it comes. My incredible team, I'm allergic to alcohol, so I don't know about drinking and all that, but they created Battle of the Beers. Before the concert, during intermission, post-concert, with like description on the beers, and get the patrons drunk, they're more likely to give you money. And we have one of our favorite audience survey who said, no one should be allowed so much fun on a Monday night. So I wanted to tell you our journey because we just went out with this incredible group that actually brought some of our biggest audience ticket sales, that program. But there's one more big surprise in our history. Let me get out of here. 6 months later, we got a call from the MacArthur Foundation. They probably saw our ads and said, how is this possibly done in the Symphony Center Orchestra Hall in Chicago? They sent 9 people to our concert without us knowing. 6 months later, Jim Hirsch got a phone call from the MacArthur Foundation and said, congratulations, we're going to award you the $625,000 Genius Grant for creative and effective organizations. So if I may share that, that when you take a chance and when you work as a team to create something memorable for your audience members, people notice. And people who you may not have invited also notice. And it has given us, we're the first orchestra in the country to have gotten the Genius Grant from MacArthur. And we just never, I mean, you know, it's not something you can apply. They come and seek you out. So it is possible. What I wanted to tell you is one last thing, if I may say, an image. Every time we pull something at our concert, they know what I'm talking about. It feels like I'm holding hands with everybody, staff, musicians, board, even the audience. We hold hands at the edge of the cliff and say, Kumbaya. And we learn to fly. And I can tell you, oh, we have many failed attempts, yes, but after 7 years, I can finally tell you, if you work at it, and yes, you learn from mistakes, you listen to each other, you try to catch each other and try to learn from each other. After 7 years, I can tell you, for a person that's literally afraid of heights, I actually enjoy the flying, finally. And so it is possible to do something risky and be sustainable and have a great time. So if I may play you this tape, we're a 2.5 million small orchestra, the boutique orchestra model, but some of the ideas is not the most expensive, but you will see in this clip some of the projects we have done trying to connect to communities, such as World Tap Dancer on Firebird Suite, live oil painting when the music is being played, and literally klezmer band and other things.
So before we wrap up, I'll just try to recap some of what we heard. Beginning with Frank's comment about art at the center, that the work we do, the music we play does belong. It has a rightful place in the center of the lives of our communities. And then asking some key questions, beginning with an understanding and investigation of what's going on in our community, what matters and what's our role. And then in answering those questions, doing it in a process that's more open, that invites more people to the table. It's not just the domain of the music director or the artistic administrator, but staffs, board members, community members have a place in arriving at the answers to these questions. And then one probably obvious is the role of partnerships and how crucial they are, both from financial support to synergistic programmatic possibilities. They're really, really crucial. And then also, with partnerships comes new voices and new perspectives, and I can't help but think that, Julie Wolfe, in choosing the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire Factory, which was a factory of women workers, is because she's a woman. She thinks about that. And when you have different people at the table, you get different results and you get a much greater breadth of understanding of what our art form is about and what it can do. And then also we heard about themes, and the themes are so fascinating because they're all so cross-cutting, and so the women in leadership allowed the Sinfoneitta to connect into a whole other dimension of the role of women in society. That opened up connections to new audience members, partners, what have you.